Betting on yourself looks a lot like recklessness, right up until you're successful. Most of us hedge long before we ever find out. But today, I get to share a conversation I had with someone who did not hedge, and it is the great Billy Eichner. Hey, it's Rachel Cooke, your modern mentor. I'm the founder of Lead Above Noise, where we help teams work better by design. These days, there is so much invisible gunk in the ways of our working, and my job is to help leaders find it, to solve it, and bring great results back into fashion. If your team or company is working hard and just not seeing the results to match, I'd love to help you understand why. Reach out today at leadabovenoise.com/connect and grab a few minutes on my calendar. So, Billy Eichner. He is an actor, comedian, writer, and producer. You may know him as the guy sprinting through New York City with a microphone, shouting pop culture questions into the faces of unsuspecting strangers on Billy on the Street. The show ran for 5 seasons, earned 4 Emmy nominations, and found a whole second life on TikTok, more than a decade after it debuted. He co-wrote and starred in Bros, and you may have seen him in Parks and Rec, Difficult People, and The Lion King. Today, he's here talking about his new memoir, Billy on Billy, an audio memoir. He wrote it and performed it himself, and he released it exclusively on audio so people could finally hear his real voice, instead of the loud character he's famous for being. It is a love letter to his parents, who you will fall in love with. It's a love letter to growing up as a theater kid in Queens in the 80s and 90s, and to the artists who shaped him. It's also a really honest account of the hustle it takes to build a show business career while staying true to what you actually believe in creatively. He is funny and candid and braver on the mic than most of us are anywhere. What struck me the most is that there was no path laid for Billy. No template, no clear next step. No version of this career sitting there waiting for him to grab it. But he paved his own way anyway. And I hope this gives you the nerve to just go off script a little bit, to write the thing or say the thing or try the thing you're still not sure will land, but bet on yourself the way Billy did. And still does. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Billy Eichner. Billy Eichner, it is very weird for me to say your name and see your face looking back at me. What an honor. Thank you so much for being on Modern Mentor today. What a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oof. Okay. So I just had the extraordinary pleasure of listening to your new book, Billy on Billy, an audio memoir.
Thank you.
No, thank you. As I was just telling you in the green room, I got it and I had to listen to it on vacation. And what an extraordinary experience it was for me. I want to say 2 things. Number 1, I am so glad this was audio only. I feel like hearing you, your voice, your personality, it would have been criminal to consume this any other way.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
It was so much fun. And I want my listeners to know that whether or not the details of this conversation is what you wanted to hear, go get this book. It is just, it will wash over you in like goodness and loveliness and funniness and gratitude. It's amazing.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you for listening. Yeah. And I'm excited that it's an audiobook. I wanted to give people that experience. And I love when entertainers that I love do their own audiobook when it's a memoir, so you can hear their voice and it's like they're becoming a friend in your head. I just love that feeling. And so I wanted to give people that experience. So I'm really glad that you like that part of it.
Amazing. And thank you. So we are going to get into some of this, Billy, because you really have had a pretty extraordinary career. And I was counting through the memoir. It seems like you followed 0 rules. Congratulations on doing nothing right and getting to exactly the right place. And I would love to get into it. And if you don't mind, I am going to start with a quote from your book I want to ask you about. And you said, "One always wants to be the chosen one, but waiting to be the chosen one has never gotten me where I wanted to go. I would always have to find another way." And I thought that was extraordinary. I think that can apply to anyone in any situation. And I want to get your take on that.
That's so funny. I'm so glad you're pulling that line out. I think of all the many, many lines in this 12-hour audiobook, I think about that one a lot. And because it's complicated, and it's easier said than done, and that's a line that friends of mine, and I'm not talking about friends of mine who are in entertainment, who are performers, friends of mine from all different walks of life have actually talked about that line. So it's interesting that you're pulling that out. And yes, you know, we hear a lot from therapists and self-help experts and all different types of people who are meant to advise us. And it's a great piece of advice. And I give that advice too in the book, which is you can't wait for someone to solve your problem for you or make your dream come true. Inevitably, of course, you need other people to get on board in some way, but you can't wait for someone to just hand it to you or to like pull you along. Like you've got to show that initial drive. You've got to make it happen for yourself in whatever way that might be, depending on what you're trying to make happen. And that's something that you hear a lot. Like I hear it all the time on various like therapists and people who give advice on Instagram. And, there's a million, self-help gurus out there right now. And they will say this a lot, which is you have to choose yourself. Don't wait for someone to come along and make your dream come true. You have to make your own dream come true. That is, I think, one of the takeaways from my book is that it really pays to bet on yourself. And sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it's not. And even in success, I always tell people I'm a fairly well-known actor, comedian, writer. I've got money in the bank. I've been very lucky. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up with show business connections or anything like that. And I'm proud of all of that. But even in success, and especially in the 13 years I struggled before I started making money doing this, but even now, 15 years after I got quote unquote successful, there is still so much rejection in my line of work. It is constant. It is an avalanche of rejection. And especially if you're an ambitious person, like I would like to consider myself to be, and you want to do different things and different types of roles and things people haven't seen you do, and you want to break out of the box that you're in, then it's even more, because that's a whole other obstacle, And so with all of that, in an industry like the one I'm in, where rejection is just a constant element of it, of course you have to choose yourself. You can't let yourself be a victim to people not getting you or not hiring you or not seeing it or feeling like you're risky or whatever it might be. So you have to rely on yourself. And I did that. It's why I am wherever I am. And, it's the reason why I have whatever success I've been able to have in a pretty cutthroat industry. And that's great. But I also want to say that there is always still a part of you that wants to be chosen. And in spite of knowing that you can't just sit around and wait for someone to choose you, there is still a part of you that wants to be chosen. I think that's a very human thing, especially if you've worked hard, especially if you have done the work and you feel like you've proven yourself, And so I don't think people should punish themselves for feeling like, oh, but at some point it's almost like dating, honestly. It's like, you at some point, sure, you can be the most self-confident, self-possessed, self-reliant, happy single person in the world. But at some point, if you are someone who wants to be in a relationship at all, you do want a cool person to be like, yeah, I want you, like you're the one. And I think that's human. And so, yes, you cannot wait for that to happen. You can have your life's happiness defined by someone choosing you. But also, let's acknowledge the fact that one does want to be chosen sometimes. You just can't sit around and wait for that to happen or be miserable if it's not happening. You have to find another way.
Absolutely. I love the way you frame that, Billy, and it came through so clearly in your memoir. I think, so much of the experience I had was this kind of you talking about things that are real and hard and human, but also you just bring kind of this lightness and this levity. And so it's really easy to take it in, because it's really easy to look at you and think, well, he's obviously grown beyond caring what people think about him. He obviously has grown, he's had so much success. Like, who needs to choose Billy? And I think, thinking about, there's this scene in your book where you talk about going to Madonna's party and like nobody is talking to Madonna, and you're like reflecting on that, on what that must feel like for her. And I think it's really lovely and revealing for people to recognize that if you have not achieved the level of success you want, but you think that getting to that level of success will help you overcome humanity, I don't think that's coming. And I think it's really kind of liberating to be able to release that a little bit.
You're one of the only people that's like sort of highlighted that moment. And I've done many, many, many interviews about the book. Maybe that speaks to the fact that there, I hope, are many interesting moments in the book. But I'm glad that you pinpointed that, because there's a whole chapter about my love for Madonna, especially when I was a kid, and how much of an influence she was, and how, so much of the book is a love letter to my parents and the confidence and self-respect that they gave me from a young age, and the lack of shame they instilled in me. But also the artists I loved also helped do that too. And sometimes in ways that my parents couldn't, because they weren't creative or artists themselves. And Madonna was certainly at the top of that list. And so, it's a long story in the book, kind of drawing the line from loving her work and being so influenced and inspired by her from the time I was a little boy, to eventually shooting a Billy on the Street segment with her, and going to an Oscar party that she had, and then seeing her sitting there alone late at night, in spite of the fact that this was a party that was just filled to the brim with some of the most famous people on earth, and everyone's partying and having a great time. And she was just, I think, taking a breather, because she had been dancing on the dance floor. And I looked over at her, and it was just for this person, this like monumental cultural figure, not only to me, but to literally the entire planet for my entire lifetime. But then she's just sitting there.
Yep.
Alone, and no one's really going up to her and saying anything, because she's Madonna, and it's intimidating, and everyone's in their own world and having a good time and dancing with their friends, and but I just caught this glimpse of her, and it was just so human.
Yes.
I say in the book, she was like, surveying this court that she had presided over, metaphorically, for decades and for my whole life. So, I don't know what she was feeling in that moment, but what I was able to see by being in such close proximity. This is not a party where there's any press. No one's taking photos. It's kind of frowned upon to take your phone out. And so everyone's just kind of letting loose. And just to see her in that moment as a person, I mean, I had her full name written on my junior high school notebook in 7th grade. So 35 years later, to just be in this, relatively small room with her and just watch her sitting alone, just looking out at the dance floor, was just very, it was very poignant in a way, and also very humanizing in a way. And I think exactly what you're saying is right, that, they're just people. All the success in the world and all the money in the world, like, yes, it will open doors for you. I mean, I'm very grateful for having financial stability. I don't have it the way Madonna has it, but I did okay. I have enough, and I didn't grow up with it either. And so I'm very grateful for that. But, yes, of course, I'm still affected by rejection, and I'm affected by negative criticism. You can't let it paralyze you, but in a way, it can get harder when you're older, in a certain kind of way, because maybe you expected it to go away at some point, and you're kind of shocked that it's still so present in your body, and that becomes a thing. It's like, oh God, I'm 47, and I'm this idiot online said something about me, this person I don't know, and yet it's like, ruining my afternoon. I'm just being honest. Because we're all human. Like, we're not built to absorb so much feedback, and now with social media, we are in a world of constant feedback, and it affects more than famous people. we're not built for all of this. And so, yes,
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to navigate.
There's so much in there. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next because I think it's true. You know, you and I grew up at the same time. I was also a diehard fan of Kids Incorporated and the Golden Girls. Don't get me started.
Oh, the best.
It is. We are in such a different time and we're carrying so much weight of so many opinions about us all the time. And again, I think it's so easy to be a regular, non-famous person and assume that those feelings are the curse of being regular, non-famous people. And again, I just think it's really nice to feel more same in some ways than different to somebody like yourself. You describe your book as a love letter to your parents, and oh my goodness, it absolutely was. And I think we all fell in love with your parents. Their ability and their willingness and their enthusiasm to just support you. What I'm interested in about your parents, though, Billy, is you were talking about like you have to choose yourself, you have to make your own way, and your parents were extraordinarily supportive. They were, paying for all these classes, they were, signing you up for this and that, but you still had to be the one to decide, like, hey, mom, hey, dad, this is what I want to do. This is the direction. This is the class. This is the thing I want to do. Your parents' support was extraordinary, but also you were driving that bus. And I think what a lot of people today struggle with, thinking about my clients, is it's not always necessarily a fear of not following the rules. It's partly that, but it's also, if I don't follow the rules, how do I know what to do instead? And you just seemed to have, and I obviously when you look back and you write a memoir, you're not still in the headspace of the person you were as a child, but I'm curious, as you reflect on that, where do you think that clarity came from for you?
Such a good question. Well, and that in a way is the question I sat down to answer when I started working on the book, because when this book started during COVID, in the early days of COVID, there was an offer for me to write a memoir. And I'll be honest, I did not wake up with a burning desire at the age of 42, which I was when I started this process 5 years ago, thinking like, oh God, the world needs to hear my life story. I mean, that never dawned on me. But the offer came through. And because it was COVID, early COVID days, we were being told as actors, oh, you're not going to be on a set again acting for another 5 years, So as it turned out, 6 months later, they figured it out. But in that time, in the interim, I got this offer and I said yes, just to honestly give myself something to do. And I started working on it, and they said to me it could be anything as long as it was personal and had a memoir like quality about it. They wanted nonfiction, but other than that, they really didn't give me many parameters. And so I sat down and thought, well, it's kind of existential in a way. It forces you to sit down and think about your life. I've had a therapist for years, but we talk about what's happening on my day to day. We don't have the type of situation where I'm thinking about my childhood or we're going deep into my childhood. I generally always knew I had a great childhood and very loving parents, even though they passed away, which we should mention. My dad died 15 years ago when I was 32, and my mom died when I was 20 years old, when I was in college in 1999. And yeah, while they were around, they were incredibly loving, just wildly, unconditionally loving and supportive. And so when I sat down to think about, okay, well, what is the Billy origin story? What am I about? What did give me this confidence? I didn't just want to do a book that was 10 hours of behind the scenes on Billy on the Street or Parks and Rec or my work. I knew that would be part of it, but I wanted to go deeper. And it forced me to sit down in a way I don't think I would have and ask myself, well, what gave you the confidence to be Billy on the Street? To develop that character? What gave you the confidence to be an out gay man in comedy from the second I graduated college in the year 2000? And it was a very different time to be an out LGBTQ person in Hollywood. Just to put it in perspective, Sean Hayes, who was already on Will and Grace, was not out yet. Nathan Lane wasn't out or had maybe just come out. Rosie O'Donnell wasn't out of the closet yet. I mean, it was a very different time. And yet, from the second I got on a comedy stage in New York in 2001, 2002, I was always talking about being gay. It's what I wanted to talk about, regardless of what obstacles that might have meant professionally. I didn't even think about it. Once in a while, it dawned on me like, oh, maybe this is unusual. But to me, I was turned on by the fact that very few other people were doing it. I was excited by the honesty of it. But again, where does that come from? Like, why wasn't I more scared? You know? And what it all came down to was, oh, of course, my parents had built this like very strong emotional safety net for me that they instilled in me from a very young age. They always let me be me. My parents knew I was gay from a young age. And even beyond the gay thing, they knew what I was passionate about. They knew I had this love of the performing arts. They knew I wanted to, I started off wanting to sing on Broadway. I had a really good singing voice as a kid, and comedy came later. They knew how much a life in entertainment in this business meant to me from a very young age. And they never, ever tried to discourage me. They always wanted me to feel like I, at the very least, had a shot. Even though we weren't wealthy, we're totally middle class people from Queens. We weren't poor, but we were not wealthy. We had no show business connections or anything like that. My parents both took the subway to work every day, like 9 to 5 people. And yet they saw I had talent, and they, when I wanted singing lessons, they made it happen. When I wanted to become a child actor, they somehow found a way to get me a manager and an agent. And I went on auditions for a few years. I never really booked very much. And they didn't care if I booked anything. They weren't stage parents. They were just incredibly loving parents. And the other thing that I realize now, which a lot of people listening to the book, it's an audiobook. Sometimes even I forget. A lot of people listening to the book have pointed out is that, and it's very rare for an LGBTQ person, especially one growing up then in the 80s and 90s, to have felt this way. But my parents, Jay and Debbie Eichner, they never instilled any shame in me about anything. About the fact that I was gay, about the fact that I was a fat kid, about the fact that I wanted to sing and dance on Broadway, about the fact that I was on a Saturday morning in our very small apartment in Queens, belting out Barbra Streisand's The Broadway album along with Barbara, like the top of my lungs. The neighbors would complain because I was singing so loudly, and my parents would kind of shrug it off and be like, oh, okay. And then they would like wildly applaud for me when I would sing. And my father would schlep me to auditions in the city for Broadway shows that I would never book because I was too tall or too gay or not gay enough or too fat or not fat enough. And they just wanted me to have a chance, And so that's why I never felt fear about being gay professionally. That's why I could create an outrageous character. And, that's why I can get through the many years of rejection before and since my career took off. And it really is the foundation of love and self-confidence. And they gave me a lot of self-respect for a kid. It's almost like they treated me like a little adult by not rolling their eyes, by taking me to see Madonna live, even though she was surrounded by gay men and I was in 6th grade and she was simulating masturbation on stage in 1991. But they took me to see that because they could feel how important it was to me. It wasn't just a hobby. I cared deeply about it. I couldn't have lived without it. And they didn't try to discourage me. They said, okay. And, they got the version of tickets that they could afford. And we kept going. But like that gave me a lot of self-respect and a lot of resilience.
It's really extraordinary hearing about them. And I didn't know if you wanted to spoil the fact that they have both since passed, but I was personally devastated with each loss. It was really hard. It's funny because you mentioned COVID and how this came to you as an offer during COVID. And it's interesting because I remember during COVID, that is when Ted Lasso kind of hit. And a lot of people talked about how like Ted Lasso was just the thing that we needed at that time. Right. And I feel like your book is a little bit of an antidote right now to what we need in this crazy, crazy time.
I think so too. I think that's why it's resonating actually.
Yes, and just being reminded of, like, the loveliness of your family, the environment that you grew up in, and people should know there is a little bit of singing in this audio memoir as
Yes,
well.
just a little.
Totally worth the price of admission, 100%. So I wanna ask you one other thing, Billy, and then one other thing, which is
Sure.
gonna be, is there anything I didn't ask you? So get ready for that. But, you talk a lot about Barbara Streisand, you talk about your love for Madonna, you talk about Joan Rivers, and, like, these were all, how do I want to say this? Differently iconic women. I don't think many people would shelve Barbara next to Joan
Hmm.
necessarily, but these were all women who, like, in their time, were sort of like, no, thank you, rules and standards.
That's
I
right.
will do things my way.
Absolutely.
Um, and I love that you were drawn, even the Golden Girls. Let's talk about Sophia. I mean, there was
Mhm.
something about these, like, really badass women that was drawing you to them. And
Mhm.
so this show is called Modern Mentor, and it really is about, kind of the mentors that we find along the way that help us discover who we are and how we want to define our success. And I'm curious, as you think about, if you think about those women as mentors in your life in some way,
Mhm.
um, what do you think that they were putting out there that was so deeply drawing you in, and what do you feel like they gave you?
I think it's a little bit different for each one, though there is some overlap, as you
Hmm.
said, broadly speaking. With all of them, there is a very palpable, pulsating sense of defiance.
Yes.
And defiance is the key word with Barbara, with Madonna, with Joan Rivers. Now, they all do different things, but that is one word that you could use to describe all three. There was a defiant quality to their work. They were all, in their own ways, for their time, provocative. They were all unconventional, and they were very self possessed from a young age. I didn't say self obsessed, I said self possessed,
Yes.
meaning they have a they project, at least, off stage, everyone's insecure and vulnerable and a wreck, but they project. They each came up with a character, even if they were using their own names, which in their cases they all were. But one thing about show business, yes, someone's using their real name, Barbara Streisand, Joan Rivers, Madonna, but it's still, well, Jones was a stage name, but still, they are they're still playing a character in a way,
Hmm.
you know,
For sure.
and they are projecting in each of those examples a character defined by confidence, by wanting to be provocative, by an unapologetic sense of self. I think there's an emotional intelligence. Now, Joan, it's a little different because that was stand up. It was a bit less layered, maybe,
Hmm.
until she got into her career later on. But I think there's just a strength. It's confidence, it's resilience, it's all of that. And those are in broad terms.
Sure.
I think with Barbara, one of her famous quotes is, people would ask her, like, how can you hold out all those high notes so long? Like, do you take singing lessons? She always is very quick to tell people she never took singing lessons.
Hmm.
But she would say, oh, I held the notes out because I wanted to, because it felt dramatically right to her. Now, she also was born with a very unique set of lungs and all of
Sure.
that, otherwise everyone would do it. So there is certain, technical skills there, obviously, but at the same time, I think there is truth to what she was saying. And with Barbara, there was a boldness, there was a larger than life quality to her voice and also to the scope of her movies. They were very romantic in a kind
Hmm.
of an old school way that movies aren't anymore. There was a lot of yearning and a lot of longing mixed with confidence and defiance, and she doesn't get Robert Redford at the end of The Way We Were, and she doesn't get Mandy Patinkin at the end of Yentl, and she doesn't get Nick Nolte at the end of The Prince of Tides. Like, and these are the movies, her biggest movies, and she doesn't get Nikki Arnstein at the end of Funny Girl. Like, in her biggest movies, she never got the guy. That's
Hmm.
very unusual for Hollywood, which almost always ends with a happy ending, right? And
Yeah.
so I think even as a kid, I loved how bittersweet that was. It felt very adult and it felt very sophisticated. And then on top of it, she was just like, it felt kind of like, I say this in the book, like some people might write it off as like schmaltzy or sentimental, but I loved how emotional it was. And I really loved that. She was also such a New York figure. And so
For sure.
for me growing up in New York, it was just like it was aspirational, but I could relate in a way. Like even as a little kid, she was from Brooklyn, I was from Queens. She looked unconventional. She was big and loud and still made herself the center of a romance, even though she did not look like the typical
Yeah.
Hollywood starlet. And just in so many ways, like, she really resonated. And with Madonna, again, it was a defiance. I was thrilled by how provocative it was. Now, I was gay, it wasn't out of the closet. I was a little kid, but I wasn't
Mhm.
attracted to women. And yet I loved how overtly sexual it was because there was something, it felt original and it felt
Yeah.
subversive. And then as I got older, she's surrounding herself with out gay men. And you just didn't see that in mainstream media at the time, and even though I wasn't out yet, I think in my mind, I was realizing I was probably gay, even though I wasn't like fully, admitting it yet or embracing it. I was like 12 or 13 years old, and this is the early 90s, and we didn't come out in junior high school. But even so, she made gay men, she kind of sent me the message that,
Yeah.
oh, when you come out, there's going to be this big, exciting, creative life for you. And it made me want to be gay. It made me excited to be gay. Again, there was such a lack of shame that she presented her own persona with, and the men around her, the gay men around her. The excitement that she clearly felt in ruffling people's feathers. I think when I start doing comedy in the early 2000s and I'm on stage shouting in a comedic way about gay sex and being very honest about it, that was a direct influence from kind of Madonna instilling in me this sense of like, well, this is exciting because no one else is doing this. And you're being so unapologetic and blunt about it. And that, I think you can even, it's strange because she's a pop star and I was in comedy, but like there are similar principles at play there.
Ugh, how unbelievable. How lovely that you were just so naturally drawn to that authenticity, and that it sounds like there was something also that felt kind of inviting and connective to you. And I think we're all seeking that on some level.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love to ask you, Billy, just as we close here, is there anything about the memoir that I've not asked you that you feel like you want to leave people with before we close?
You were speaking to this earlier, and I wanted to say this, so I'll say it now. I say in the book that I think you can divide people into two categories: people who were successful in spite of their parents,
Mm-hmm.
and people who are successful because of their parents. Barbara's memoir, actually, that she just released, I loved every second of it. But even as an older person writing that memoir, so much of it is about her lifelong struggle with overcoming the fact that her mother was jealous of her and envious of her and never seemed proud of her and barely said, I love you to her, you know? And it still was stinging her, even in her 60s, as she wrote this book, and so many memoirs of entertainers that I've listened to. And I love listening to audiobooks that entertainers like record on their own, which is part of the reason I wanted mine to be an audiobook. But, Mariah Carey's audiobook, like so many of them are these megastars, are about how they had to overcome a parent who was discouraging, even actively abusive in some way. And that's a story you hear a lot. But my story is different. I hope that it's an example of the fact that success can come out of love and not trauma. And I don't believe in tough love. I think tough love is bullshit. I have always thrived by being encouraged and being comforted, whether that was by my parents, by my acting teacher in college, by my friends who I've made along the way, by collaborators professionally that I've had. Like, I think tough love is bitter, and I don't think it ages well. And the world is cruel enough. We don't need our parents and our loved ones like preparing us for cruelty. what made me successful, what made me confident is that my parents were incredibly empathetic to what I wanted and needed and did what they could to provide it for me, within their means.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the book is resonating, because it's comforting in that way. It's a comforting book because it's not about how I had to overcome people who didn't get me or didn't understand me. It's quite the opposite. And I hope that people, are comforted by that.
And I hope for the same. Billy, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. It has been an honor and a pleasure hearing you for 12 hours recorded and then getting this time with you. It's been a delight.
And I thank you so
everybody
much.
Goes out and grabs a copy, Billy on Billy, an audio memoir.
Yeah. And I should say it's because it's only an audiobook, which is a bit unusual. People ask where they can get it. It's on Audible and it's on Spotify and Apple Books and Libro.fm if you want an independent bookseller. So it's anywhere you can get audiobooks.
That's awesome. And we will have links in the show notes. Thanks again, Billy. Take care.
Thanks again.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Billy Eichner. Go listen to Billy on Billy, an audio memoir, available wherever you get your audiobooks. It is so, so good. And you'll find links in the show notes. I'll be back next week to help you keep building a workplace that works. Until then, visit my website at leadabovenoise.com, where we reimagine how work gets done so that results and well-being rise together. You can follow Modern Mentor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is a quick and dirty tips podcast. Thanks to the QDT team. Audio engineer, Dan Farabend. Director of podcasts, Holly Hutchings. Ad operations specialist, Morgan Christensen. Marketing manager, Rebecca Sebastian. Marketing contractor, Nat Hoops. And podcast associate, Maram Elnagib.